Welcome to Alyssa Jean's Reviews. This is my review for Star Trek Discovery Season 4, Episode 10, The Galactic Barrier. Before I get into it, I must give the standard spoiler warning against my better judgment. I just feel obligated to do it. Obviously, if you have not watched all the way up through Season 4, Episode 10 of Star Trek Discovery, why on earth did you click on this video? So you have been warned, you will be spoiled if you have not watched the episode yet. So let me go ahead and dive into it with my overview, my overall thoughts on this episode. And yeah, it was there. I mean, it was necessary. I feel it was necessary for the story. We definitely needed to get Tarka's backstory. That was very important. He's been set up as the main antagonist of the season, which I like. I'll get into more of that a little bit more. I do like that he is the antagonist as opposed to the mustache twirly Osira from last season. Big improvement. But since he is being set up that way, we absolutely needed to get his backstory, so that was necessary. We got some very key character development and some good development of relationships, particularly with Burnham and President Rillak, that I really liked, and we got some really important things in this episode. But I mean, on the grand scheme of things, when I go back and look at this, the season as a whole, this episode will be pretty forgettable. It's not one that I will really remember very much. There's not anything memorable in it. It was just kind of there. And I would say that my overall viewing experience of this episode was not as enjoyable to me as the previous two. Although, to be fair, I seem to be a bit higher on the previous two episodes than most people. I gave them each an 8 out of 10. It seems like most other people would be more in the 7 out of 10 range, or possibly even lower for the previous two episodes. So it's not like I think the previous two episodes were mind-blowing either, but I just found the experience of watching them more enjoyable than this week's. This week's was frankly sort of boring, and it will be very forgettable. And yet I recognize that I moved the plot forward in some very key ways, not the least of which, as I just mentioned, giving us the very necessary backstory of Tarka. So let me kind of dive into more of the details. I usually go through and separate out each plot. I think this week I will start with what I would consider to be the A plot, even if maybe didn't get quite as much screen time. It seems like it's hard to tell what got more screen time actually, but I would start with the Discovery plot, and then I'll get into the Tarka thing, and then touch a little bit on what I would consider a little C plot with Saru, which is very cute. So the Discovery storyline. Yeah, trying to get through the barrier and the things and whatever. It's funny, I watched another review where somebody pointed out that in Star Trek V, The Undiscovered Country, it's the last time we see the Galactic Barrier. Cybok figured out how to do it in the 23rd century, and yet here we are in the 32nd century, and they're still having issues figuring it out. Like, Cybok figured it out 1,000 years ago. Get it together, people. Anyways, I don't know. I found that largely uninteresting, to be quite frank. And to me, the key part of this storyline is that relationship between Rillak and Burnham, which I've always been fascinated with. As I mentioned way back in my episode 1 or 2 review, I forget which episode it was where Rillak was first introduced now, that I expected Rillak was just going to be one of those stereotypical, admirals or commodores from the original series who are antagonistic and question the captain's every order. And she did have those characteristics, but it was much more deeper than that, much more complex. and she was a much more interesting character than that stereotypical, asshole admiral or commodore from the original series. Since then, they've developed her character further. They developed her relationship with Burnham further, and in this episode, we get really a key step in their development of their relationship. As at the very beginning, I love how they set these ground rules. So that Burnham's like, okay, we're gonna set some ground rules because we don't want to make the same mistakes we made last time. And Burnham's like, you can't be questioning my orders. And Rillick's like, well, I have to ask questions. And then in the end, they agree. Okay, you got the diplomacy end of it. You got the diplomats, all of that. I got the crew. Okay, we're good. And I really like that. It shows maturity with both characters. It shows an advancement of their relationship. And I just absolutely love this Rillick character, especially since my original expectations were that she was going to be kind of the antagonistic asshole Commodore archetype. And she's been a lot more than that. So I absolutely love this character. And I think I've said this several times throughout the season. So I really loved this dynamic that has been developed between these two characters. And then the crux of this episode is them getting this garbled message from Admiral Vance that, hey, looks like the DMA is going in the range of Earth, Navarre, and Titan, they called out specifically. I will try not to harp too much on the spatial implications of this. Why does they always act like that Vulcan, or Navarre, as it's called now, is Earth's neighbor, like it's Mars or something? Like that would look like it's right next door. They obviously wanted both Navarre and Earth to be in range so that both Vulcans and humans could be upset by this. But spatially, it doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me. Where is Navarre compared to Earth? They act like it's right next door. And they have, not just in this episode, but historically throughout Star Trek. They seem to behave that way. Anyways, with that aside, I did find it a very interesting dilemma whether or not we tell the crew. And Burnham thinks that they should be honest and tell the crew, and really thinks that they shouldn't, that the crew's going to need to focus. And then in the end, it is Rillick who decides to tell the crew, and the diplomats too, everybody on board, not just the crew. And they had set up before where all of them, this I didn't like actually, where they were all like, oh, I can't wait to go to Hawaii and go surfing. And Reese was like, I'm going to hike the Pacific Crest Trail. Really? Does the Pacific Crest Trail still exist in the 32nd century? Is still a thing? It seems like it would be super easy, barely an inconvenience to hike the Pacific Crest Trail in the 32nd century, but I guess the point of it is to get back into nature, and you probably are just going to go back to the basics as much as you can. But I was surprised that would still be a thing in the 32nd century. But that's cool. I love backpacking and hiking personally. I've hiked on portions of the PCT many times. So that's cool. I'm just like, really? There's a lot of weird things like that in this episode. There was also, at the beginning, I'm freaking blanking on the character's name now. I've said the character's name before, but now I'm blanking on it. David Cronenberg's character. Is like 3-hour tour. He references Gilligan's Island in the 32nd century. Really? And he's just like, oh, it's an expression. Because Saru's like, well, it's going to take us more than 3 hours. And he's like, it's just an expression. So, okay, I'll just be like, okay, that's an expression that's lasted 1,000 years. And maybe he doesn't know that it came from Gilligan's Island necessarily. It just became an expression. Okay, whatever. But I always find it a little weird when they add 20th and 21st century stuff into Star Trek, especially now that they're in the 32nd century. It's just a little weird. But anyways, I'm getting a little sidetracked. So they have that cheesy scene where the whole crew is like, oh, I can't wait to go back to Earth. And it's just like, oh, come on. Like, I thought that was laying it on a little thick. So that they can all be disappointed when they find out that Earth is in danger. And the danger is real, though. Here in the 32nd century, I think they could really destroy Earth on the show, and or Navarre. We've already had Vulcan destroyed in an alternate timeline, so we could have Vulcan / Navarre are destroyed in the main timeline way in the future in the 32nd century. We could even have Earth destroyed. Earth is not a part of the Federation anymore. Although all these people are talking about wanting to go to Hawaii and the Pacific Crest Trail and all these things, they actually don't live there anymore. They don't have family there, or if they do, they haven't sought them out. I don't remember if that was ever a storyline. So Earth could really be destroyed. So the stakes are real. Spatial inconsistencies aside, the threat is very real. The stakes are real. It's not like, Star Trek the Motion Picture, which I watched recently, which was like, yeah, obviously the Earth is not going to be destroyed. Like, not just because the movie came out in 1979, but even when it first originally was in theaters, we knew the Earth wasn't going to be destroyed. Here, I think the stakes are real. So that makes it very intriguing. Anyways, yeah, that was the more interesting part of this storyline to me, was the Rillick and Burnham stuff. Not so much the, technobabble, let's right into this bubble and go into the Galactic Barrier. So, again, nothing mind-blowing, nothing that's going to be super memorable at the end of it all, but, kind of interesting. Now let's get into the Tarka of it all. Now, first of all, I do have to say, when I first saw Tarka and Book were planning something, I'm like, wait, why are they not in jail right now? Like, why are they not incarcerated? Now I'm struggling to remember what happened at the end of last week's episode. Shouldn't they have just immediately beamed Tarka directly to the brig? Like, why is he running around free? I guess I don't really... I'm drawing a blank on the end of last week's episode. Why did not just do that? I don't understand why Michael would be hesitant to take Book into custody, especially since he agreed to their plan and it wasn't his fault. But I still think that they should have at least taken him on Discovery, and then he would have probably ended up being incarcerated back at the Starfleet headquarters. But I don't know. I was thrown off by that they were running around free. I was like, why are they allowed to run around free? What is happening? And just... I'm drawing a blank on what happened at the end of last week. Anyways, all that aside, they do have their own plan. It starts with getting some programmable matter that they need to get through the Galactic Barrier. So another MacGuffin for them to get through. But it does allow for them to take time out and get into Tarka's backstory, which was absolutely necessary because, as I mentioned earlier, he is set up to be the main antagonist, and we need his character to be a little more fleshed out. We at least need to see more than just that one little 30-second run through of his background story that he gave a few episodes ago. Like, we actually do need to see it if he's going to be this important antagonist. So we did, and I do want to say, as I mentioned before, that I'm very thrilled that he's the antagonist as opposed to someone like Osira, who is very mustache twirly, because he is a much more interesting antagonist. He's not a villain. Like, I would call Osira a villain, but he's more of just the antagonist. He's not really a villain. He's a good person, and you see how much of a caring person he is in this episode. So that was very important for us to see. Very important to develop this character. And I'm thrilled that he's the antagonist, and Book is kind of an antagonist as well. I'm very, very thrilled about that. After last year's mustache twirly villain, this is so much better. I'm very happy about this. With all that said, his storyline, although very important, was not anything all that particularly interesting or shocking or anything that we wouldn't have expected to happen. We did need to see it. We needed more than the little, dialogue that he gave us a few episodes ago, but it wasn't anything all that mind-blowing. It was, kind of what we would expect it to be. And it was very good to see his friend. I'm still unclear if they were just really close or if they were lovers. There's a lot of implications that they might be lovers. Why don't they just flat out just show that they're lovers? What is this 1980s or 90s, like, gay ambiguity, being ambiguous? I always have trouble saying that word. Why? We've got two gay characters who are a couple already. We've got a couple of trans characters on the show. Why are we being ambiguous about it? I don't get it. Either say they're lovers or just say they're friends. But they're still kind of insisting that they're friends, and yet there's some implications they could be more than friends. So I don't know. Anyways, it was interesting to see this character, and I'm glad it was a new character. I heard all these crazy theories, like it was Tarka was in love with with his parallel universe self, because that's how self-centered he is. That would have been dumb. So I'm glad it really allows us to see just actually how caring of a human being Tarka really is. So I think that was the most important part of this. And now Book knows, which is also very important. So now we can move forward into the final episodes where Book and Tarka are going on their mission. So honestly, that's really all I have to say about that. It was important. I'm glad we got it. It wasn't mind-blowing. It wasn't particularly exciting, but we definitely needed it. And I am super happy that we have a much better antagonist this season than we had last season. All right, now I want to jump into this C plot really quick with Saru. And actually, there's one other thing I wanted to touch on with Adira's return as well before I wrap things up and give my rating for this episode. So I kind of talked about this a little bit last week, how I really like Saru's relationship with potential relationship with the Navaran president. I really love how he's just so like shy and like, I don't know, I couldn't possibly. I kind of relate to that. So I really do appreciate seeing Saru's vulnerability that way. It makes him a lot more, relatable, as I just said. And although I'm wondering if the Navarans or Vulcans, are they a little more emotional in the 32nd century? Has that been established? They're kind of letting the logic go a little bit because they've reunited with the Romulans. Because I do get that sense from this character, and I'm okay with that. It is the 32nd century, so things can change. And I really like the dynamics between these two characters. I give a big thumbs up for this potential relationship moving forward. I really do enjoy it, and I especially enjoy how just vulnerable Saru is in all of this. So big thumbs up from Alyssa on that. Now as for Adira, glad that they are back in the fold. I wonder if this means Gray is not on the show anymore. Where's Tilly? Is Tilly not on the show anymore? I still think Tilly has to come back in some fashion, especially since Mary Wiseman said that she would. So we'll see about that. Now I'm trying to remember from the third season, did they take out that symbiont that Adira had? Because that's never been mentioned again. Did they take that symbiont out, or did they just decide that they didn't want to deal with it? Because Dax used to mention the symbiont all the time, and I haven't heard Adira reference it at all this season, and makes me think I'm forgetting the scene where they took it out last season. I don't recall. So if you want to let me know in the comments, or I could do my own research as well. But I am glad that they brought Adira back, at least. Really, they were only gone for like 3 or 4 episodes, which is kind of a normal thing that happens to characters just in the regular course of Star Trek. So totally okay with that. I'm glad that they are back on the ship and having some nice little scenes with Stamets. I know my brother will probably say it's over sentimentality, but I enjoy the dynamics between Stamets and Adira, and Stamets learning to be a quote-unquote father for the first time, and really for the first time really vocalizing that as he's making comparisons to how his father raised him to how he's behaving toward Adira, and being very honest and upfront. This is why I'm going to be doing this, because I'm going to be overcompensating for how my father treated me, just so you know. And Adira's like, okay, good to know. I like that. I think that's very sweet. Okay, so I guess that was the D plot. Anyways, That pretty much wraps things up. I'll go ahead and end with my rating out of 10. As per usual, I give a rating out of 10 every week. 1 is the lowest possible score, 10 is the highest possible score. And this week's episode, I'm going to give a 7 out of 10. I can't imagine that I would really give it any higher than a 7 because I just didn't particularly I don't know, I didn't have fun with this. I didn't particularly enjoy it. I was just recognized that it was important and we needed these things and it was there. So since it was important, I'll give it a 7, but it's just not an episode that I'm going to remember when the season is done. When I think back to season 4, this will be a very forgettable episode. The only thing I might remember is that I did review a review where I said several times this episode is forgettable, but I'll probably forget that too in the grand scheme of things. An important but not memorable episode, and it is a 7 out of 10. Okay, that does it for this week's review. Please join me next week as I review Star Trek Discovery Season 4, Episode 11, and Star Trek Picard Season 2, Episode 1. What? So, I've been getting my reviews of Discovery out on Thursdays. This one is actually out a little bit earlier than I normally get them because I had a snow day from work today, even though a snow day in Oregon is like a little dusting of snow and they cancel school, which is fine with me, but it gave me more time to get my review out a little earlier. Typically, you can expect my reviews late Thursday night by West Coast time. And for Picard, while Discovery is still on, don't expect my Picard reviews until Friday, most likely. It's always possible that I could decide to jump on and do a live stream Picard review on Thursday evening, like I used to do with the Wheel of Time when it was on with Discovery. But I think you can expect more likely my Picard reviews to come out on Fridays while Discovery is finishing up its run. And then once Discovery is done, then Picard will go ahead and slide in to that Thursday spot. And then when Strange New Worlds premieres, there's going to be 1 week where Strange New Worlds will cross paths with Picard. Then I will do Strange New Worlds on Friday and Picard will be Thursday. So that's how that's all going to work. For more information, you can check out my March calendar video, which should be released within the next few days. Speaking of videos that are being released, I have a brand new trans life update video where I talk about sexual preference, sexuality, and dating. And then I also have my latest edition of Nostalgia Lane where I talk about the never-ending story. So please check out all of that stuff. Please subscribe. And I will see you all very, very soon. Goodbye.